Morning. Joining us now, former CIA Director John Brennan. He is a senior national security and intelligence analyst for NBC News. Also with us, NBC News and MSNBC senior foreign affairs analyst Brett McGurk. He recently served as the special presidential envoy for the Global Coalition to Defeat ISIS at the State Department, and now a distinguished lecturer at Stanford University. Good morning to you both. Director Brennan, I'll start with you. You tweeted yesterday, quote, "We are now in a full-blown national security crisis," in reaction to the news that Donald Trump got rid of his acting director of national intelligence and replaced him because the ODNI actually went and did its job briefing the House Intelligence Committee. What are you hearing from your friends, from your former colleagues inside the intelligence services today?
Well, I think there is tremendous concern that this just is a continuation of the trend that they have seen for quite some time. Donald Trump has been very dismissive and even disparaging of the intelligence profession and intelligence professionals and their products that they send to him. But it's one thing for him to ignore it. It's another thing for him to actively try to prevent the Congress from gaining access to this intelligence that is so necessary for the Congress to be able to do its job. So I think they see this as portending even greater efforts on the part of Trump to put his loyalists in these positions so they can squelch the intelligence that really is necessary for national security. And that's why I said this is a crisis.
I think you've worked for 6 presidents.
That's correct.
3 Republicans, 3 Democrats. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Never, ever. I didn't agree with a lot of the president's decisions throughout the course of those 6 administrations, but I never got the sense that they didn't want the intelligence community to do its work, to the executive branch as well as to the legislative branch. But what we're seeing now is such an anomaly, such an aberration from what we have seen in the past about the importance of the independence of the intelligence community. And two nonpartisan national security professionals have been removed at the helm of the intelligence community. Joe Maguire and then Andrew Hallman, who is a senior CIA officer who is serving as Joe Maguire's deputy. That is a virtual decapitation of the intelligence community. And now who is going in there? Someone who has no experience, no credentials as far as the intelligence community is concerned, Richard Grenell. And so the intelligence professionals can only see this as yet one more example that they are not being allowed to do their job.
So we've talked a lot over the last 3 years, Director Brennan, about the institutions holding in the face of President Trump. What does that look like right now as we talk specifically about the intelligence services? If there is this, as you put it, decapitation at the top of these organizations, how does that institution hold?
Oh, that's a good question, Wally. And I'm hoping that the intelligence professionals are going to continue to do their best to provide the intelligence and the analysis that the executive branch as well as the legislative branch needs. They need to try to do it despite the headwinds that they're feeling coming from the White House. Now, a lot of these individuals, I'm sure, are being intimidated and now are going to be pulling some punches because they don't want to be shown the door. It's one thing for the senior professionals to be axed, but is the White House going to start going down further now and trying to remove intelligence professionals who are just trying to do their job but are going to face the wrath of a very vindictive Donald Trump? So
what's your message then to your former colleagues who are still fighting the fight inside the intelligence services?
Carry out those responsibilities that you swore an oath to do. Because they have that very solemn responsibility, whether you're intelligence or in a diplomat or in law enforcement. You need to carry out your responsibilities with the greatest integrity and honesty and let the chips fall where they may. I would tell them not to go to the door, not to leave, continue to do their work the best they can.
Brett McGurk, we've heard from Director Brennan. What's your take on all this and specifically a precedent? Have you seen anything like this from a president, a White House, as it relates to the intelligence services?
I very much agree with John. Of course, I've been in the room with him a number of times. Just important for viewers to recognize the intelligence community is the first line of defense for our nation. And intelligence analysts, it's their job to tell the hard truth to policymakers, especially the president. And what the president's doing here is creating a culture really of just shoot the messenger. And if intelligence analysts are, there's a chilling effect from telling the truth, our country is at risk. We have an ODNI, Director of National Intelligence, because of the attacks of 9/11. Out of the 9/11 Commission, it was determined that we needed this integration function across the 17 intelligence agencies to collect information, analyze it, and give decision makers like the president the best information he can to help protect the country. And in terms of hiding information, not only from Congress, something else is going on. One of the best documents that came out of the Trump administration was a worldwide threat assessment from Dan Coates from the DNI about a year ago. And the trend lines in that document, you talk about separating signal from noise, were that a lot of trend lines in the world are running against us. China and Russia working closer together than at any time in 50 years. Iran is more likely to move towards a nuclear weapon because we got out of the deal than rather had we stayed in it. A lot of things President Trump did not like to hear. And this year, it looks like there will not be a worldwide threat assessment that the American people will see. So that's just another piece of this. And it's quite troubling because the American people have a right to see what is obviously protecting all sources and methods. But what are our intelligence agencies seeing in terms of the future and direction of the country? And if the president's not being told this, I agree with John. If you're a deputy assistant secretary, an assistant secretary, you have intelligence analysts in your office. I had them. I needed those men and women to tell me the truth every morning. And if the culture is, I don't want to hear that, and if I don't like what you're saying, I can fire you, that is a tremendous chilling effect across the intelligence community, and it'll really, I think, impact the ability of our men and women to protect the country.
Director, would you tell people that you know who, or their kids, to go into the intelligence service the way you went into it at this point? Would you tell them to have a government job with the way things are going right now?
Absolutely. I speak to a lot of college students, and I tell them to disregard this political, maelstrom that's going on in Washington. Well, because this country needs FBI agents and CIA officers and diplomats around the world. And Donald Trump is in a very painful phase that we're going through right now. But we will get through this. And we need to have Americans with great skill and talent to be able to dedicate themselves to public service. So I encourage people who are currently in the government to stay there, do the best they can, and push back against any type of political pressure that they might be feeling. But for young Americans, take this, in fact, as a rallying cry, that you need to be able to go into the government in order to carry out the duties of law enforcement, intelligence, and diplomacy.
That's an important message. I want to get to another topic as well, Brett McGurkin, with you as well, Director Brennan. That's this deal between the United States and the Taliban in Afghanistan, a week-long truce to reduce violence. What is the prospect for peace, and what does peace even look like, Brett, in Afghanistan?
Well, I think the key step, I think David Ignatius said it earlier on the show, is that intra-Afghan talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban. That's something that really have never been able to have in 19 years, and we'll have to see if that happens. That's critical. The Taliban just put out a statement this morning, too, and said the end game here is all foreign forces leaving the country. That seems to be different than what the U.S. officials are saying about having a residual force to maintain pressure on al-Qaeda networks and counterterrorism. So I think there's a lot to still come out here. We'll see. I think we should be hopeful. I think Zal Khalilzad, one of the great diplomats I've had the pleasure to work with, he's done a great job under very difficult circumstances working in the Trump administration. So we need to see hopeful. But the key step will be these inter-Afghan talks, and we're going to have to really support the Afghan government to make sure those really gain some traction.
Director Brennan, it's a relatively small step. The Taliban says we won't commit violence for a one-week period, but it is a step. What does peace look like to you vis-a-vis the United States and Afghanistan?
Well, I think it's going to be a phased process. You're going to have that first week. It'll be interesting to see whether the Taliban can control some of the more radical elements within the organization. The Taliban is not a monolith. So I think we're going to have to go into this with our eyes wide open. And as Brett said, there needs to be the intra-Afghan talks that are going to be able to push this forward. It's not just the military issue and the security situation, it's the political situation. But getting back again to the issue of what Trump is doing to the intelligence community, the intelligence community is necessary in order for our lawmakers and for the executive branch to understand what's going on inside of Afghanistan. In the Situation Room, I was in hundreds of meetings, many of them about Afghanistan, and the intelligence community was essential to be able to provide that objective, independent analysis, that intelligence perspective that then the policymakers can take and move forward. If, in fact, that intelligence community now is being cowed not to do anything that might be counter to what the Trump administration wants to hear, we could be going into a real serious problem in Afghanistan as we go down this peace process path.